Hello! Welcome back to more Poke-Mindfulness. We're a little later. I meant to put this on Monday, but hey, stuff happens. Today we're going to be using this Dragonite deck I made. It's not my idea entirely. I had looked up like how you're meant to use Dragonite, and it said that, at least the guide I found, it said that you typically want stallers that lets you build up the Dragonite, because that Draco Meteor, which is its only attack, is 4 energy, but it's pretty cool because it selects 4 Pokemon at random and it deals 50 damage to each Pokemon that's selected. And that could be, all 4 Pokemon on the opponent's side of the field, or that could be one big Pokemon 4 times dealing 200 damage to it. And this is definitely like a randomness aspect to it, a randomness aspect to this deck. It definitely needs a lot of stuff to go right for it, as you're definitely going to see, spoiler alerts. A lot of coin flips need to work out for this deck to work. But anyways, this is Poke-Mindfulness. So the thing I had wanted to talk about for this episode is change, right? Because I feel like change is an unavoidable part of life. You will experience many changes, and whether you like it or not, they're gonna come after you in a big way. I know myself, as being someone with autism, change can be quite stressful for someone like me, especially if my brain doesn't have time to process it. And that change can literally be as simple as last second plan change. Hey, I know we were gonna hang out, but something came up. Sorry about that. Let's reschedule. That can be enough to kind of overwhelm me. But everyone, I think, deals with some issues with change, I think, to a degree. I can really only talk about my own kind of experience with change. I know back in 2017, right? They found out I had celiac disease, so I can't have anything with gluten in it. And that was really hard for me to adapt into how I ate, because what were some of my favorite foods? Well, let's see here. Burgers. I used to love going to KFC. I used to love basically if it's breaded meat or bread, honestly, in general, I was a big fan of that. And one of the biggest things was figuring out, what now, my life has been this way for 20 years, and now I have to suddenly rework everything I know about food. And I remember it was super hard at first, and I lucked out because funny enough, my mom also has issues with gluten, but she figured that news out when there was no options at all. I still don't know how she did it, but I had found having to figure out what life without gluten was really tricky, and it's something that I feel like people take for granted, because it's in honestly a weird amount of stuff. The amount of stuff I've seen that have gluten in it, apparently, and this was not my finding, this was my mom finding out. Did you know makeup has gluten in it? By the way, for those that don't know what gluten is, the simplest way I could describe it, it's in most grains. So wheat, barley, rye. Sorry, I'm playing with a fidget spinner as I talk about this. A suction cup fidget spinner too. Also, you like that just ridiculous lack of luck in that first battle? But finding that change was figuring out how to make that change was really hard, because I had to relearn a lot of stuff. And I think when we have sudden changes come to us in life, I feel like it's really easy to get like caught up in it, like, oh, this is the biggest thing ever, like, you know, like I'll never recover from this, like it's nuts, you know, like, you know, to use my gluten example, as, you know, there was definitely part of me that was like, well, what now? Like, some of my favorite stuff has gluten in it. You know, Kit Kats were my favorite chocolate. You know, fried chicken was some of my favorite food. What now? But what I found over the years is that, like, it doesn't have to be the end of something. It can be the beginning of something new. And I know that probably sounds really corny. And you know what? If that's corny, you know, guilty as charged. I am the corn that lays on the cob, or I don't know. But it is true. It's like, it can either be the end of something you used to love, or the beginning of something that's honestly not that bad. Like, I remember too, especially because the media did not help with this transition from being able to have gluten to not being able to have gluten, because how, especially back 2017 and before, how was gluten-free displayed? Well, oh, you know, if someone's asking for gluten-free, they're just being a snob, or like, or how else? Oh, all gluten-free stuff tastes like cardboard soaked in tuna water. Why tuna water in particular? Don't ask. Like, that was how gluten-free stuff was portrayed at the time. So here I am finding out this is my life now. I'm thinking, like, I'm never gonna like food again. Food is just gonna be an end. What is it? A means to an end. You know, I eat food because I'm hungry and need fuel, nothing more. Which sucks because I'm very passionate about food. And funny enough, spoiler alert for where this story goes, it's kind of built a new passion. It kind of, this having to change my diet caused myself to actually develop a passion for food, because so not only was the gluten thing a big change that came, finding out that my stomach was so sensitive to this, I also had to start taking my dairy allergy seriously, because I was not doing that before. I was just eating milk and just, weirdly enough, my body could tolerate it at the time, but I guess realistically, you know, when you're eating something that is effectively, you know, for lack of a better word, poison for your body in particular due to the allergy, you can only last so long before your body just has enough. And that's when I also had to take dairy out of my diet. So I had to eat mostly vegan stuff if I wanted stuff like cheese or ice cream, and all the gluten-free alternatives. And it was a big change and a big adjustment, because what you learn really fast is the gluten-free alternatives are really expensive and the vegan alternatives are really expensive. And that, having to adjust to that was really hard sometimes. But I found, like, especially once I started, like, learning how to cook properly, that's kind of where, like, things took off from. Like, nowadays, I can make a mean, we'll call it quote-unquote grilled cheese, because the cheese is vegan cheese and the bread is gluten-free, but it's you know what, like, I've cooked it for people before, and they've liked it. I've been experimenting with hot sauces, and just a bunch of other stuff I've been just teaching myself how to do. And it all stemmed from the fact that I, especially like when I was just starting to make that adjustment from gluten to gluten-free, was kind of being very like anti that stereotype of, oh, all gluten-free food tastes awful, because it doesn't. And I wanted to show, like, that's, if you're having something that tastes subpar that's gluten-free, that has nothing to do with the concept of cooking gluten-free. That has everything to do with, because people think like, oh, gluten-free bread and gluten-free muffins and gluten-free cookie. But think about it this way, right? If I were to go into the kitchen right now and fry up some eggs, I'm trying to think. Fry it, make it like an omelet, right? Eggs, maybe chop up some onions, maybe a little jalapeno in there. Nothing in that should have gluten. Another example, if you were to go to, to dinner and make, I don't know, eat steak and potatoes, right? Unless you're adding something to that meal, steak doesn't have gluten, it's just beef. Potatoes don't have gluten, they're just potatoes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like this immense hatred for the idea that gluten-free must taste bad. It was like, no, it doesn't have to at all. And it kind of ignited this desire to want to learn how to cook stuff, and it kind of proved, like, yeah, no, you can eat gluten-free stuff and it tastes really good. And I mean, don't get me wrong, right? Like, pasta isn't going to taste the same. Gluten-free pasta doesn't taste the same as gluten pasta, but honestly, depending on the brand, like, there's some really good stuff that honestly, like, what I can't even remember how glutinous pasta tastes. Oh, also, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I was getting so fed up with never getting the Dragonite mechanic to work that I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do a beginner match because I just want the mechanic to be shown off properly, and I'm more likely to get it out of the event, like, ranked matches that all they're using is, like, Pikachu, Mewtwo, like, not necessarily those ones exactly, but like all the meta decks. And when it comes to like competitive stuff, I've always had a fierce love of anti-meta. But anyways, and I guess like what all this talk about, my journey to kind of, figuring out I could no longer have stuff with gluten, which was like a lot of stuff that I had grown used to the person I am now, where like I feel like I can make pretty good meals just even without the being able to use standard bread or stuff. I guess what I'm getting at is that in most cases, barring very specific niche changes, it'll work out. I don't know who's watching this. I don't know if you're dealing with your own sort of changes going through life, but listen, it's gonna be okay. It might seem terrifying in the moment. It might seem really scary in the moment, but it's gonna be okay. And I think a big part of that is just trusting that the universe will guide you in the right direction and will kind of make sure you're doing okay. I know myself, right? Like, I definitely have my own share of insecurities, and it's okay. Like, and it's okay to admit that. Like, I firmly believe one of the first steps into kind of working on yourself and really like becoming the best version of you is to kind of look at yourself in the mirror and find out like what are you insecure about, and kind of getting to the cause of the root cause of it. But what I'm getting at there is like, I know in my case, like I deal with really bad imposter syndrome where, the successes I have reached in my personal life, I'm thinking like, instead of being able to properly celebrate them, I'm like in my head going like, okay, it's all gonna come crashing down any moment, and that's a terrible mindset to have. And I'm not gonna tell you, viewer, to stop thinking that way, because it's not that simple. Like, especially when your brain is hardwired, maybe you've had your own experiences in life where your ability to trust is shot, right? So the idea of it's gonna be okay even if you're dealing with change right now, or, you're deserving of your successes, stop questioning it. It's not that simple. But what I can say is the people around you have no reason to lie, If someone's saying you're doing good, right? You're probably doing good, right? If you're if you've reached a point in your job that you're really happy, like, celebrate that success. You know, you wouldn't have reached that point if you didn't deserve it. And I find sometimes, like, my best method to kind of deal with my own imposter syndrome is to kind of have those moments of self-reflection, kind of where you kind of just look at yourself in the mirror and go, like, no, you are deserving of these successes. You got here because you're deserving of these successes. And, you know, there's no need to be so on guard that, like, it's going to be ripped away from you at any moment. And I personally think, at least with myself, it just comes from that it's hard to trust. And at least in myself, what does that come from? I'm not really going to go super in depth about that now, because this video would be like 5 hours long and full of tears. But oh my gosh, that joke derailed me. Hang on a second. But it, you know, the simplest way I can put it is, we'll just say I had my fair share of troubles growing up, and we'll leave it at that. You know, so and I feel like, you know, there are plenty of people that have that difficulty in their life where, you know, stuff happens as you're growing up, and then you become an adult that just has a hard time trusting people. And I wish I could say that, like, you can relax, it's never gonna happen again, because the reality is, like, some people just suck, like, but it's sort of like, it'll be better for you in the long run to relax, because when you relax, you can open your mind and your heart to people that do love and care about you. And when you have those moments of betrayal happen to you, that breaks you, that hurts you, that puts you in that vulnerable state, lean on those people in your life that love and care about you. I think I've been thinking this for a while. I've noticed people nowadays don't communicate, right? I've had that problem in my own life. I've been the person that sucked at communicating, and I've been the person on the receiving end of that poor communication. And it's amazing how many problems would be solved either by A, just having a conversation, or B, realizing that it's okay, like, or no, basically, how many problems can be solved by just having a conversation? I was gonna say, like, sometimes knowing when stuff doesn't need to be addressed, or when to leave things alone. But I actually do think that comes from having those good communication skills, because it is a skill. Knowing when something needs to be talked out, and when something should just be left alone is an important thing. But I think that lack of communication comes to the part of, like, you know, people don't... I truly believe you should be able to tell your friends you love them and have it be completely platonic. Like, you know, tell the homies you love them. Oh, and also, here's the Dragonite shotgun mechanic I was talking about. Look at this. I KO'd 2 Pokemon and just immediately won in 1 attack. It's so great, because even if you, let's say, only hit 50 on every single Pokemon, that could be a lot of Pokemon losing 50 health. But yeah, like, I'm a firm believer, like, you should be able to tell the homies you love them. And I think that communication would go a long way to help sort of the trust issues that I think a lot of people have, just based on the society we live in. And in turn, that would probably help the very common issue that a lot of people have with change, because I think that fear of change comes from a fear of the unknown. And naturally, like, the best way to kind of remove that fear is to be able to just talk. Like, I tell my friends constantly. I don't know why I started there. I've told my friends plenty of times, like, hey, I love you like a brother. Because I think that kind of communication, like telling people they're loved and cared for, is important. Especially because, you know, and I know a lot of people out there have this friend in their life. I have it in my life too. and I've been making a point to kind of be more open. Everyone has their strong friend that they think is okay. Check on your strong friend, because that I think oftentimes the quote-unquote strong friend like archetype or for lack of a better word, archetype comes from people who just, they feel like they need to shoulder everyone's burdens. But you should tell those people to, hey, you alright? Are you sure? Look, you're saying you're alright, I'll trust you. Remember, I love you, my friend. If you ever need someone to talk to, I am here. Talk to me. It's no trouble at all. And I really do believe like that kind of healthy level of communication is important. And I wish that it was more common, I guess. It's kind of like, it's why I have a big problem with the alpha bro mindset that a lot of dudes have, and maybe that's a topic for another video, because I think this is the last battle of the video, because oftentimes a lot of the alpha bros, champion, what are some of the big things they say to do? Don't show your emotions, bury it, men gotta be buff and strong and emotional rocks. That's not realistic. And change can be one of the kind of aggravators of this, but the best analogy I can use to describe it, imagine when it comes to dealing with emotions and problems, everyone has a little plastic bag. Some people got bigger bags, some people got smaller bags, right? If all you ever do is stuff your feelings and your sadness into this bag, the bag's only gonna hold so much, right? Like, you can stuff it down, you can squish it, you can use whatever method you have to save on space, but that bag is gonna overflow at some point, and when it overflows, that bag might rip. There's gonna be a mess. Not everything might come out. But if you just practice those good communication skills of just letting it out when you need to let it out, talking to people in your life that care about you, talking about your problems, that bag doesn't overflow because you're periodically emptying the bag. And when you empty the bag, instead of letting it overflow, the bag doesn't rip. The bag doesn't stretch and get damaged, The bag stays in good shape. And that's the easiest way that I can explain the importance of communication, is don't overflow your bag. Now, side note from the mindfulness, and that's really the best advice I can tell you to carry into the rest of the week. Let it out. We're in those holiday seasons. We're in the holiday season. I forget where I read this, but I know that's a very common time for people with like depression. Where it gets worse and aggravated. Let it out. Use your support network. Don't overflow your bag. As you go through the week, remember you are doing the best you can you're making the best of you're doing your best. That's all, and in the end, that's all you can do. That's all anyone can ask of you. And if no one's told you this week, I am proud of you for what that's worth. Now, back to the side note I was going to bring up before. I have a pre-recorded video with a Blastoise deck, but I think going forward, when I pre-record this footage for like videos, I'm going to stick to like the random battles, because I've been finding that the decks used in like the event versus, against when compared to this, like the event versus has you start seeing the same decks really fast. This Wigglytuff deck is really cool, and I'm happy I got to lose to it. So I hope everything I've talked about made sense, and I hope I didn't get too rambly there. And I guess some reflections about this deck. I like it a lot. I think it's good personally. That being said, the obvious weakness is you need a lot to kind of go your way. You are weak to fast decks if you're using this Dragonite deck. I quite like the Dragonite card, especially that full art, because it is gorgeous. I want to find a way to make it work. It's tricky because you can kind of only use Pokemon from water or electric the water or electric side, so that your energy is like your energy distribution makes sense. And obviously one of the weaknesses too is not getting the right energies. I had a game where I had Dragonite ready to go. I hadn't gotten a water energy in like 5 turns. I was so mad. But you're weak to luck. That's, I think, the best way I can sum up this deck, because you need Frostmoth to stall so you can build Dragonite. If you're outpaced by your opponent, you'll probably lose. If you get really unlucky with the sleep turn, like coin flips, you'll probably lose because you're not stalling. But it's, all in all, it is a really fun deck. It's just definitely like, if you're someone that gets mad when when you get really unlucky, I would say use this deck sparingly. Over the next little bit, I'm gonna try and find a way to make it a little more consistent. Basically, when I looked up how you're meant to use Dragonite, it basically said you want Pokemon that stall so you can actually bring out the Dragonite. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope the mental health talks of mindfulness are helpful in some way. And I hope they're understandable, because I know I start off these videos with kind of like one topic in mind, but then I start floating as I just naturally get into it. And so I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I guess, you know, if it did get lost in translation a little bit, the advice I'm giving you is to just roll with the punches. You're doing your best. It's okay. You know, change is an inevitable part of life, but when you kind of just relax and open your heart, mind, and soul to it, oftentimes it's not as scary as you might think. Anyways, take care until next time. Bye-bye!